Good morning, everyone. Good day to everyone. I want to. Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you,
Yes,
sir.
we can hear you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thanks for responding. First and foremost, I want to apologize for our apparent tardiness. I got to know that the follow-on lecturer was not available to take the remaining part of the course and did not revert to me until Professor Deshegun brought it to my notice. So I want to apologize for that first and foremost before we're going to today's class. It will also the class for this morning will also be recorded so that we'll have access to the recording, especially for those who can't make it for this morning's session. I will also crave your indulgence because there are about 4 topics. I'll crave your indulgence to take 2 this morning and at another suitable time to take 2. If we cannot make another suitable time work, I can as well do a recording and make it available so that we do not, so I don't take away your personal time to meet this objective. You have access to the recording, you also have access to the notes at your own suitable time. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I will quickly take on. So this is my first time taking this part of the session. It's usually left to the more senior colleagues. So you'd you will experience some what's called part of the first flight intentions. So, but if there are any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute, ask questions. I'll be willing to roll back and explore those areas with you. As usual, this class is still majorly a discussion, and it builds on what we had done with Ethical Foundation of Public Policy. Now, having looked at those concepts, we want to explore the role of the individual and how those roles are performed within the context of their social status, right? For example, you would expect that someone who's in proper standing within a community acts in a particular or in an expected way. So we ask ourselves, if a person is expected to act in a particular way from expectations that were developed outside his control, sometimes we're born into those roles that we play. Sometimes we achieve those roles that we play. Sometimes we, are given those roles that we play. So how do you now hold that person, responsible for the impact or the effect of their actions, right? A very interesting example would be casting our minds back to let's first talk about the evil actors. Casting our mind back to the action of the Nazi soldiers or concentration camp guards, in Germany during the program against the Jews, right? We sometimes have to ask ourselves that, was their defense of I was given an order, I only obeyed an order, is it enough to acquit them of all personal responsibility, in the discharge of their duties? You also cast your mind back. For example, I know this was a global issue, so even those who are not from Nigeria would have, heard or read about it, the police brutality issues that were rampant in Nigeria over the last few years. Some of the issues, for example, a very, very naughty one was the Okuzu SARS in Anambra State, and where the unit of policemen basically operated a slaughterhouse, right? And of course, when some of the policemen who were fingered in the allegations were caught and put to the tribunal that was constituted to establish blame, some of them, their response was simply it was in the line of best practices that were established. So our questions, as a society, exploring those conducts would be: who is responsible? Who do we hold ultimately responsible? Who do we hold personally responsible? And then who created those roles that even made these people feel it was okay to perform in this way? Okay, so it's in light of that that we look at social roles and individual responsibility. Explore that. So first, let's define what social roles are. Are they assigned or are they achieved? We know that everyone as human beings were social in nature. A common state is that animal. As human beings, we interact with each other day to day in our day-to-day lives, and the lives of different people in society are entangled with each other in one way or the other, either through business or through intermarriage or other kinds of relationships, right? In a society, each of us is related to others through relations, either personal or public. And the subject, the way we look at it, right, is that we share these relations as a society as well. Now, the defined position that each person owns in a society is referred to as the status, and the status of each person can be relative to those of others. Status of a person can be of two types. It can either be ascribed, that's assigned to a person by birth, or it can be achieved, earned through effort. Each person in each status is expected to have certain responsibilities because the society expects something of you, right? For the social status that you'll be allotted, right? And those expectations are in terms of behavior, obligations, and rights that we also call social roles. Now, those social roles, right, they include a defined set of actions designed, to every individual in the society in the concept of social roles. The world is imagined as a stage, and the individuals who take up different social roles are thought of as actors. That's a role theory, which is based on the assumption, right? It's based on the assumption or the observation that people will behave in a predictable way. This puts forward the thought that the activities of a person are made out of defined categories because we occupy different status as individuals, right? It says that our behaviors are contextual, that we need to situate it within contexts, right? Based on factors like social position. For example, you would expect that the MD of a company of probably a large conglomerate in your state would act in public in a different way compared to probably someone who's a clerk in the same institution. A clerk could, for example, think his social status is not so important. He could maybe litter the street, he could harass somebody, and sometimes people won't even think much of that. But if somebody of higher social status were to, for example, do those same actions, they would be cancelled, right? We would take a lot of issues with them acting like that in, in the public. There are actually five models that five major models of social role theory. And one is the functional role theory that examines social roles with importance to shared social norms. There's also the symbolic interaction role theory. This focuses on the impact of individual interpretation of responses to behavior on social roles. There is the structural role theory as well, that utilizes mathematical models to examine the influence of the society as a whole on individual roles and how we perform. There's the organizational role theory that looks into the role development in organizations. This fits more around when we're looking at, either social enterprises or looking at for-profit organizations, or sometimes even looking at societies that are set up more like in a hierarchical model, right? There's also the cognitive role theory that examines the relationship between expectations and behaviors, right? And we'll dwell a lot on this kind of categorization. Now, categories and concepts around social roles. Remember that we're still just trying to lay the base framework of saying what are social roles, what does it entail before we talk about responsibility, right? So, cultural roles. Culture is one of the major attributes of society. In fact, it is often seen as the true mark of a society. A society without culture is often in this. You often cannot distinguish a society without culture, and it's often said to be amorphous, right? So culture is it's one of the ways we can easily identify a set of people, right, that form a society. Culture is one of those major attributes. People often engage with different aspects of the culture, different aspects of the culture, including the way of dressing, including the foods they eat, including the kind of arts they consume, including even how their religion is organized, right? A person who is into the domain of culture has to fulfill the expectations that are required on him or her. For example, in Yoruba culture, for example, we have priests, right, who have to fulfill duties like performing rites and ceremonies. Also another culture in Nigeria is the Igbo culture, right? You also have the chiefs or the paramount chiefs, who take decision on behalf of the community after consultation, right? They also perform rites and ceremonies like breaking of kula and sharing of palm wine at meetings as well. There's also social differentiation. Now, this refers to changes in social roles with profession and relations. Individuals practicing different professions, for example, pharmacy profession, teaching profession, medical physicians, medical doctors, nurses, all of these have different roles within our society, and all of them are differentiated from each other by some marked function, and even the way they dress, even the terms they use that are called professional jargons. So there is social differentiation that happens with each of those levels in our social roles. There's also situation-specific roles. People take up different roles according to the situation that presents. Sometimes the person can be a victim of an accident. or an eyewitness due to unpredictable situations, right? You can also classify somebody who has suffered maybe childhood abuse as a survivor, different things, not situation specific, can also assign some social role to the individual. And then we also expect that the person will act in consonance with those expectations we have of that role. There are also biosociological roles, right? Which are which essentially means human beings within the environment have different responsibilities towards the way we conserve and preserve nature. So this details our relationship with our environment and how our activities either destroy the environment or preserve the environment as well. And then the last one, which is very popular, are gender roles. We're expected to play roles according to the gender we belong to, like the roles of the father, the mother, the woman, the man, the children, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing is that these roles tend to also, for example, you would have noticed that a person can occupy a cultural role and also be instantly assigned a situation-specific role, while not negating that they already have a biosociological role in process. And of course, their gender roles are still intact. Now, that being, we can have role conflicts. And this refers to situations that happen when a person is expected to act in contradictory roles in everyday life. The conflict can either be a product of contradicting interests or when there exists different norms on what the responsibilities of a particular role should be. For example, as our cultures become more, should I say, international or more urban, there are a lot of things we have in cultural context that begins to change. For example, if we look at some of the cultural roles or social ecological roles for women, right? We have things like women stay at home, women tend to the family, women cook, women take care of the home, and other norms that have existed in the past. But as we've become more urban, as we've also experienced more technological innovations and increase in economic activities, you find that those norms are becoming more of impediments and becoming more of distractions than useful cultural cultural situations that are useful for women. Of course, there are other arguments like, when women become more involved in the workspace, when women become more involved, they become more prone to accidents, they become more of private agents, and this may result into differences in social roles across generations, leading to isolation, depression, and all those kind of social conflicts, right? So what is important here is to note that role conflicts can happen, but when role conflicts happen, we either resolve them by looking at the sum total of all the roles that that person is currently involved in. For example, a woman who is currently a full-time worker, right, and expected to still perform roles, including things like domestic roles and other expectations, may put so much strain on their relationship and their health that it becomes nonsensical to continue one of both roles. Right. For example, currently in the UK, because of the cost of living crisis, a number of women who were in the workforce are now beginning to resolve to come out of the workforce and remain at home because childcare costs are extremely high. But also, a number of people are also beginning to look at it that the reason why that is happening is because a lot of the men who are also in the workforce, right, are not bearing similar responsibility to the women that their female partners. They're not bearing as much responsibility the female partners are bearing in terms of child care, in terms of home management, and in terms of responsibility to the household, So the idea is to show where there are social roles, there will be role conflict, and we must need to negotiate how we experience our roles. There can also be role distancing, which refers to the practice of you distance yourself from a role. For example, actors often have to play different roles that are different from their life's reality. For example, an actor may act like a very wealthy individual in a movie and have to go back to their hustle after the entire enactment of a rich person on a movie set. Also, a man could be a male person, a man could be serve as a boss at work, right? Work as a boss at work, and then when they get home, they have to shelve that egoistic motivation and work, pull their hands, roll their sleeves up to work in teaching their children at home, helping them complete assignments, cleaning up the dishes after dinner, helping to mow the lawn, doing tasks and chores around the house as well, right? So there can be role distancing, and that can serve some purpose as well. There's also role exit, which is discontinuing from a role in order to establish a new one. For example, if you're transforming from, being a single individual to getting married, or maybe transitioning from a young couple to a couple with children. So you're transitioning from an individual role to a parent role, right? So those are also possible expectations. There's also role expectations. Those are the set of actions that we expect from a person who occupies a certain social level, right? There's also role performance, which is the term that refers to the level of performance of the person with respect to the role that he or she is assigned to. There's also role reversal that can happen when people exchange their roles with each other, right? A very interesting one can be, it's a psychologist who is used to helping people resolve their mental health disorders, may need to also turn to their friend and get some some support, during a time of emotional distress. And then there's also role segregation, where you can have separating of role partners from each other, and a couple of other, role strain, for example, is a stress you meet, you experience in meeting expectation and obligations that attached to your role within society. Any questions so far? Okay, so we'll just keep going on.
Yes.
Oh, the someone? Okay, please go ahead.
I thought you were asking if we're following so far. I don't have any question.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Okay, now let's quickly look at what it means to have individual responsibility. Is it predetermined or is it determined by you as a person, right? Now, social responsibility. This is the ethical framework that puts every individual and organization under an obligation to act for the benefit of society, right? And this varies depending on either the age or business. It depends on the social role in which that individual is. We expect, for example, that a child, a child would not have the same role as an adult. A child, for example, can even be excused from the responsibility of their action compared to an adult who expects to be responsible, to know the consequences of their action, to know that their action will either contribute to the well-being of other people involved or, contribute to degrading well-being of people in their community, right? So whereas the corporate social responsibility requires commitment from corporates towards local community, the country's economy, and the quality of life of the workforce, the social responsibility, right, of individuals like scientists, engineers, it binds and holds them responsible for both positive and negative consequences of their work. Now, it's important that we look at this point we established at the beginning of this lecture. Everyone who participates within our social context, there are effects or impacts of actions on everyone or on the environment or on how the relationships or on how relationships are established within our society. Also, the combined social responsibility of these is a choice on their work. So therefore, we look at these individuals in performing their work, we look at them as free moral agents. That's people who can make a choice to do good when they look at the consequences that is going to happen, or they look at the personal benefit, they decide to do what is wrong. Now, beyond individual responsibility, we must now look at the moral responsibility. And under moral responsibility, our prerogative here is we want to be able to assign either praise that compensates somebody for what they've done right, or to rebuke them or reprimand them for how they have caused problems to the general society. So, for example, how are they making judgments? How are we going to make judgments about whether a person is morally responsible for their behavior? And how are we going to hold others and ourselves responsible for actions and the consequences of action? This is a fundamental and familiar part of our moral practice and our interpersonal relationship of our social roles. Now, the judgment that a person is morally responsible for their behavior involves, first and foremost, attributing certain powers and capacity to that person. So, like, I mentioned earlier on, they are saying that they know fully well the results of their action and that they can take judgment. They can judge it as good or they can judge it as bad. Now, whatever the correct account, of those powers and capacities at issue, right? The fact that this person, this individual, can either assess their action or assess minimum of one or two options and evaluate the impact of those options on people, right, means that we can hold them responsible for their action. Now, our assumption here is that the normal adult human being, right, possess the powers and capacity in question, and that non-human beings and very young children, those suffering from severe developmental disability, are generally taken to lack these powers, right, of being able to evaluate their actions. Now, this brings us to the considerations of what are those powers that can either make somebody responsible for their action or can make us look at, moderating the punishment for the actions that they are taking. This brings us to the consideration of freedom, responsibility, and determinism. Now, sorry that this is a bit tiny. I try to cram as much points into one slide so we do not have too many. So I'll share this with you later in the lecture so that you can also go through it by yourself, right? So you can expand and also read a little bit more into each of these. Now, so like I said, the basis for which we are going to attribute responsibility and either punish a person or moderate the punishment or even absolve them of all punishments is that we need to find out, are they really, really capable, right, of moral reasoning? Are they capable of morally evaluating the decisions they took? So to hold somebody responsible involves responding to that person in ways that are made appropriate by the judgment that this person is morally responsible. These responses often constitute instances of moral praise or moral blame that we either assign, oh, this person has done well or this person has not done well. Now, if we are going to assign blame or we are going to assign praise, then it means that this person has it in their power to choose. While we hold that this person must be able to choose, there are different viewpoints around the power to choose. One is that the relevant power is a form of control, and in particular, a form of control such that the person who has made that choice, that's the agent, could have done otherwise than to perform the question at the question. So it means that this person could have taken another course of action. The second is that this captures common sense notion of free will and one of the central issues in debates about free will, about whether possession of free will is compatible with causal determinism. Now, causal determinism says that everybody will act in ways that are being predetermined by historical factors. So whether you choose to do right or you choose to do evil, it's not really up to you. It's up to powers beyond your control. So the fact that somebody is doing something, it's because of things that have happened in their past. So because somebody was abused when they were young, it has also changed the course of actions that they take when they are older. So you will remember the statement often said that hurt people hurt people. Have we all heard that before?
No, absolutely no.
You have not heard that before.
Not at all.
Okay, let me put it in the chat area. Maybe I'm sure a number of us would have heard it before. Hurt people hurt people. What this means is that people who have suffered some measure of abuse are likely to abuse others. Is that clearer?
Yeah, sure, it's understood.
Yes, yes.
Ex-
It's understood.
Excellent. So the idea is that people who have suffered some sort of abuse in the past may be likely to continue in that mode of abuse because they have been abused themselves. Is that okay?
It's clear, sir.
Awesome, awesome. So give me a minute, please. Let me quickly open some. Just give me 1 minute.
Am I the only one that cannot hear you?
He said we should give him a minute.
Okay. Sorry for the disruption. I noticed that my screen went sharing again. So I was trying to find out what was going wrong. Okay, okay, so it's fine now. Right? So now this perception Winston, you can't hear. You can hear now. Better now. And Winston, am I more audible now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, okay. So we'll just go on that. Oh, awesome. Thanks for doing it. Like I mentioned, hot people, right? And the basis of when that determinism, that's the concept of determinism, that everything action we take is determined by prior decisions or actions that have happened in the past, and so we are unwilling agents in the journey of life and history, right? That's led to classes thoughts as well. One was compatibility, right? Even though things in the past can affect the direction of choices in the future, but within that same framework, every individual is still able to reason, is still able to evaluate, is still able to decide the course of action they take. So they must still be responsible. On the other hand, there are the incompatibilities that borrow on, the fact that if all that we're going to do is determined by things that have happened in the past, how can you hold one person responsible for how they take decisions today? because they are no longer responsible for their actions. All that they are doing is unavoidable consequence of things that have been done before. So this person lacks control, right? Now, between these two, there have been approaches to try and merge both the compatibilist and the incompatibilist approach using three main approaches that have looked at the moral fabric. That's a moral responsibility question, right? So, for example, there's forward looking. And in the case of the sorry, it's raining here as well, so the network will be a bit may fluctuate a bit, but we'll definitely soldier on. I was saying that there are three important approaches that helps us balance these two perspectives. Forward-looking approaches to moral responsibility tries to define responsibility by focusing on the beneficial consequences that can be obtained by engaging in these practices. And these are very influential in the earlier part of the 20th century. There's been a lot of opinions around. Forward-looking perspectives tend to emphasize one of the central points discussed earlier, that a person being subject to determinism does not entail that he is subject to constraints that force him to act without. So it means that the person, even though they are under the influence of historical facts, under the influence of things that have happened in the past, but they can still make choices. They are still free. So I was saying that under forward looking, right? It says that even though we're under the influence of the past, but we still are free moral agents and will be able to make decisions about our choices today. Under this concept, it has been it has been very useful in saying that motivate people to act in the best interest of society by praising them, assigning blame when they are wrong, and also treating people as responsible in order to motivate them to act well. There's also the issue of reactive attitudes. And the best material on this is the book the seminal paper Freedom and Resentment, right? Which does most of the work on exposing the moral responsibility, from a, and what it does is between the two thoughts of the incompatibilist and the compatibilist, right? So a free will requirement on responsibility. Saying if somebody has free will and they exercise that free will, then they're ultimately responsible for their action. There have also been criticisms about this, but the fact is that because the forward-looking, because these are reactive attitudes, a focus on emotions, right, looks at that for a person to be able to realize that their actions are either good or bad, being able to exercise that free will, then they are responsible for their action. The third in the third approach to kind of assign responsibility between both the compatibility, the incompatibility. There is a responsiveness theory, right? Which says that there are two levels of free will that we're looking at. There is a part of regulatory control. That's the part where a person can freely do one action or the other. The only action that is given to them is the evil action. They can either choose to follow through with it or bear the consequences of not following through with it. Then there's the second part, which is the guidance control. That's aside from the fact that they have regulatory control to choose one action or the other. Guidance control is the ability to guide their own behavior in a direction, whether or not an alternative exists. So this is the part where even if there is no alternative, right, and they must do that evolution, guidance control means that they can decide to take personal sacrifices and, elicit some public good. We'll see an example of this later. We'll see an example of this. Somebody, a member of the Attorney General in a certain city decided to resign when the president, wanted to use their influence of the position of the president to stop them from investigating a wrongdoing that the president had participated in. So guidance control, that is the second level that has been exposed by the responsiveness theory to say that if a person has regulatory control and they can express guidance control, then they are ultimately responsible for the final they can be held responsible for the effect of their action. Now, in spite of these, or complementary to these, there are contemporary debates, and we'll look at 3 classes of contemporary debates. Those are the kinds of debates that underline public policy, laws, judgments in our courts, discourse in public sphere. There are 3 broad classifications for those debates that are currently happening, and they affect the way we assign blame, the way we assign responsibility for actions in our community. Now, the first one to look at is the face of responsibility, or the faces of responsibility. Do our responsibility practices accommodate distinct forms of moral responsibility? For example, are there different senses in which people may be morally responsible for their behavior? Contemporary interest in these possibilities have their roots in debates between philosophers, right? And the basic idea is that a responsible agent is not simply moved by their strongest desires, but in some way they approve, right? They approve of or stand behind the desires that move them because they're governed by their values or because they are endorsed by higher order desires. So in this instance, we are looking at the real self, that this person who has taken this action, right? We are looking at them as free moral agents, but I have had, several things from them. Take, for example, the real self that we are alluding to here, or that we're talking about here, who we are saying that can receive responsibility when they are acting under their own distinct desires, right? We're saying that this real self can be affected by trauma. For example, childhood trauma. This person was abused. True. Now, that childhood trauma can affect self-governance. Okay? That childhood trauma can affect self-governance, can either make them more prone to take decisions that are extremely selfish and result into harm to other people within the society. And in that way, we can say that their self-governance is impaired. In this way, we can look at two distinct possibilities where behavior can be properly attributed as reflecting morally important features of self, virtues. We can attribute responsibility. We can say this person is responsible for their action, but because we cannot expect them to, due to their past trauma, be able to independently assess the morality of their actions. Because of that premise, we can attribute responsibility, but we cannot make them accountable for those consequences of their actions. There are two different things. We can attribute responsibility. We can say this person acted in this way that endangered the lives of several people. We lock him up in a mental institution where he can get care by specialists. But we do not lock this person up in a prison or commit them to a death sentence because we have identified that this person is morally deficient. They cannot, of their own self, decide the moral values of their action. You will remember that either through exposure to mass media, you will find out that there are certain people who have committed heinous crimes, but the court or society has excused them from the most severe punishments, but has not seen them to be, non-culpable for their responsibility of their action. So, for example, somebody commits a murder and he pleads under the covering of insanity. In most societies, they will be punished. Responsibility will be attributed. So they will be taken out of society and placed under care. But in most communities, they will not be punished to the full extent of the law by maybe life imprisonment or even on the other hand, where there is full self-disclosure, where this person can evaluate and understand their actions, right, we can attribute accountability. This is when you satisfy more than the attribution of behavior, but we hold this person accountable. We punish them to the full extent of the law because we understand that from all that we have observed, through expert opinion, through their own personal remorse, we can find out that this person can evaluate their own action. So we attribute, we make them accountable, we attribute responsibility and then make them accountable for their actions. I hope that is clear. At that point, so we have two levels of two levels of responsibility at this point. We face responsibility attribution, and we can face responsibility as accountability. Now, attributionism, which is also, more of an academic discourse, is where you even reject conditions that would excuse agents from moral responsibility if shaped under adverse conditions, not in control, or even unable to recognize their moral status or behavior. We are saying that if attributable must be accountable under attributionism, but there are very few societies that still subscribe to this. In most societies, we want to contextualize what they did and what happened, for them to do or take that action at that time. Now, there is a third level to this. There's a further point where we take it to answerability as well. Here, the focus is on ability to evaluate own judgment. If this person is able to evaluate their own judgment, right, then they have the furthest extent of responsibility in this case. So in under answerability, we look at 3 levels. The person is either attributable, where we can say that facts about this person's behavior shows that these things happen because of their background. We also have accountability responsibility, where an agent's degree of regard for others, we look at it. Can this person, how well is this person able to evaluate their own actions and act on it? We use that to moderate the extent of punishment we give the person. And there's answerability responsibility, which responds to the agent's evaluative judgment. So if we're sure that they are morally competent, how well, within the context of which they took that action, how well can we say that they had evaluated their decision and still went ahead to act on it? Now, these are the breadths, where we look at the phases of responsibility. It's either we're looking at the two-pronged approach, where we're looking at attributability versus accountability, which is based on, can this person, evaluate their action? And then on the two-pronged approach, where this person is, where we look at more intricate context around their action. We look at attribution, we look at accountability, and we look at answerability. If you are going to punish somebody who cannot even benefit from the punishment, let's assume that somebody can evaluate. They know that what they are doing is wrong. But if we punish them, it will not correct them. In fact, they will revel in the fact that we are punishing them, right? And that begins to speak to the point of psychopaths. Psychopaths sometimes exist in the fringes of society where people do evil actions. They can sometimes evaluate that their action is evil, and they also enjoy the process of the punishment. It doesn't result into them being corrected. In fact, the process of punishment kind of reinforces them to continue those actions when they're released. So on that fringe, answerability is missing. And so people like that would usually still be committed to care for lifelong, evaluation, rather than being taken to a penitentiary where they're punished and then they are released after some time. The second class of this is around moral competence. Let me quickly share a story here. This story was designed by Susan Wolf, in 1987. It's a fictional story, so it's not a real life thing, but it's just a story, just similar to the trolley problem. Right? This is a story about Jojo, right? One of the best known illustrations of moral competence. Jojo was raised by an evil dictator, and as a result, he became the sort of sadistic tyrant that his father was. As an adult, Jojo is happy to be the sort of person that he is, and is moved by precisely the desire to imprison, torture, and execute people that he wants to be moved by. Therefore, Jojo fulfills important conditions of responsibility, right? However, the argument is that it may be unfair to hold him responsible for his bad behavior because he grew up under a dictator and does not know that there is the possibility of a different kind of moral codes or moral sets to judge his action. So this comes to bear on us when we talk about moral competence. Even though that story seems to rely on absolutes, that don't, this isolated. In fact, a very practical example is to think about North Korea, right? Think about the fact that it's a society that is designed in its way to be separate from other communities. So they kind of are an isolated culture. If a person grows up in that community and learns to be a dictator, right, without studying outside, of course, we cannot say that the current dictator is similar to Jojo. You know that the current dictator had most of his I think secondary to early university education. I think it was in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was either in UK or where was that? I think it was UK. The shoe. So that does not, say what would resent something like that to Myung-Yoon would be someone who did not travel out of North Korea, only in North Korea for all his life, and became in North Korea. Now, the basis for moral competence is to say that the ability to recognize and respond to moral considerations is a condition of I sincerely apologize for network. Unfortunately, the wire is not Clement, so but the recording will definitely be available and everyone will have it afterwards. I'm sorry that the network is like this at this time. The contemporary debate at this point is moral competence. To say that if somebody cannot be adjudged to be moral competent, we cannot assign responsibility. We can say that the extent to which they ask moral competence on condition of responsibility, on the basis for the next step, which is situational approaches to responsibility, what it says is that Sorry. So, the approach seems to look at this responsibility along the continuum, saying that the extent to which a person is morally competent to the extent to which we apply responsibility for their actions to. On the extreme is psychopathy. Like I said, it's on the fringes of society. The psychopath is typically presented as an agent who other psychological capacities in a way, or as nearly so as possible, incapable of responding appropriately to moral considerations. They are already set in doing those that want to do, and regardless of how to try behavioral change communication or behavioral interventions, they are set in those ways. Now, the third is skepticism, right? And the skepticism, we're basically looking at moral responsibility requires free will, and free will involves access to alternatives in the way that is not compatible with historical predisposition for future actions, that determinism. Then it will follow at this rate. I think we'll have to call the internet guys. I think I'm more responsible for the disruptions in this class. So, sincere apologies in this. So, there are a few other considerations that we look at as well. For example, moral law. We say that the past affects future actions and choices absolutely. Then what are the elements of luck? For example, if somebody who is a bad actor decides to kill somebody, and when it shoots, the gun jams or the bullet hits something else, and then the person that they determined to kill is unhurt. Are they different from somebody who tried to kill someone and ended up killing the person? Are they different? Another consideration is if somebody attempts to. Hello?
I thought you asked the question, so I said no, they are not different.
Yes.
Because their intention.
Because of the intention. Okay. There are two schools of thought around this. One is that because of moral law, that we need to treat the first person who did not end up, we need to treat them differently because of moral law. And that society treats differently. Because you can't prove anywhere that this person tried to murder this person, right? Except where there are irrefutable proofs that this person may have attempted to kill this other person. But in situations where it does not go through, they will not be punished at the same level of responsibility. Meanwhile, there is another school of thought that says if they had the same motivations, the same interests or intentions to do the same kind of hurt, then we should punish them in the same way. But the prevailing thought is moral law, right, has a certain predisposition for excusing one over the other. Now, also under skepticism, if the choices are entirely determined by past events or past actions or past choices or past history, how do we now hold this person only responsible for the choices they make? And under this, philosophers think that we can, in good conscience, attribute, we cannot hold them ultimately morally responsible for their actions. Now, this does not mean that we remove attribution. It just means that we cannot end up with accountability, even though we can say this person took the action, but we cannot hold them responsible for the action since their past precluded that they would be taking this action. Other considerations around skepticism include personal history and manipulation and epistemic conditions on responsibility, which we will not discuss because of the esoteric nature of the discourse. So in general, or in summary, we've looked at how we determine moral responsibility and how we assign accountability, in this lecture. We looked at freedom, we looked at responsibility, we looked at the general concept of determinism and how it affects how we assign responsibility. We looked at a few approaches to moral responsibility. We explored forward-looking accounts, we explored reactive attitudes, we explored reasons, responsiveness views as well. Then we now looked at three broad contemporary debates: the faces of responsibility, we looked at moral competence, and we looked at skepticism. Any questions on this broad conceptual lecture? Any questions or clarifications that you want me to give? None? Okay, so let's okay, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, Mohammed Kamara speaking.
Great, please go ahead.
Yes, the course time. I think the course should be on Thursday and we are having it today. And based on that, some of our colleagues wouldn't made their way to the lecture because of maybe other activities, or maybe they never had the time. So I don't know whether the time will be scheduled now or we'll go back to our regular time. And the next thing is, we were told by the course coordinator that the in-course assessment will be based on assignments, and we have not gotten any assignment. I don't know whether you are thinking of giving us an assignment to do.
Yes.
For the in-course assignment. So when?
Yes, I intend to give you an assignment.
Okay.
So what I'll do is, immediately after this class, I will send I'll send they're going to be they're not going to be long form writing, just short form writing assignments, and they will be contextual to your current positions. So we're just going to look at a few assignments around ethics of public policy, and also, of course, I will give you the notes before giving you the assignment. Even though it's going to be practice-based, but to also help guide to guide you in doing the assignments as well. So I'm going to send that latest by end of day today. I'll send it with the notes, and then it will help you do that. Then with the timing, I sincerely apologize for that. I was looking for a way to quickly catch up since we missed the last 2 or 3 weeks, due to no fault of yours. So yes, this week we're going to revert to the usual time, which is Thursday for the lecture. So I hope that's fine.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, and once again, I want to apologize for that lapse. It wasn't intentional. So let's quickly take on one other topic before we call it a day. And this topic is one that's a bit interesting. It's around the common good. Just give me 1 minute. Common good. Have we been able to take some time to go through the pros form note I sent for ethical foundation of public policy? Have we had time to go through that?
Yes, I have been reading, but I have not read it. Not the entire document. At least I have opened it and started reading that.
Okay. Did we send the
Sorry,
the
sir.
recording of that lecture to you?
May I come in, sir?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes, some of us don't have your notes. We don't know how you send them, whether you send them to the class
I
rep.
sent them to the class rep. Class rep, what happened?
We don't have it. The only notes we received from class rep was for the notes we received were for pharmacovigilance.
Oh no. I sent class rep.
That's the greatest challenge we are having.
Oh, I sincerely apologize. I sent it a while ago. So I thought everyone should have had access to it by now.
We don't have
Since
it.
class rep is not class rep. Do you want to chip in something?
Hello, sir.
Mohammed,
Hello, sir.
Yes, please. Go ahead, sir.
I think there are two group of class here. There are the old set and the new set. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe the new the old set, the class rep, maybe probably he couldn't get it, but the new set, the new set of class, they all have the note. I think probably this problem is
Okay.
jamming to old set.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I will send us a Google form. Let me see if I can set it up right away so that we will all we'll all just submit our emails, and then I can use that as a listserv to reach everyone. So I can send directly to everyone. Just give me 1 minute. Let me get the form ready. This course is MPY.
Okay.
Just a minute.
So I bet you only have session or come about you mobile.
853.
Okay, so mo kuja ka wanu baranda ka sembe al.
Okay, so I just sent you a link to a form. Okay, try clicking on it. Let's see if you can respond to that. Let's be certain that we can all respond to it. Let's just get maybe one or two people respond to it. I want to be certain. Awesome, excellent. So it's working. So please let's share all in at least one. What's up? What's up? Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Since everybody has gone to the what to the form.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
All right. Please kindly share the link, the form link within your WhatsApp groups so that we'll be certain that everybody can chip in. And then I'll send the lecture note directly. I'll also send the assignments directly to everybody. And that way we won't, nobody will miss out on anything. Again, I apologize for that, missed communication, but it will be sorted out. So let me quickly run us through the last topic. Is someone saying something? So apologies, I'll run a bit fast through this topic. But if you have any questions or anything isn't clear, please draw my attention to be willing.
Tamba, please mute.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so I would like to quickly go through the common good, public interest, and corporate goals. You know, at the beginning of this class, we talked a lot about why are we even interested in examining our actions? Why are we always talking about reasoned behaviors? Why are we talking about evaluating our actions? For what purpose, right? Is it just because is it just an academic exercise, or we feel that there is, an ultimate goal to what we're doing? Now, that aside, when we think of an ultimate goal as well, are we thinking about the actions of individual actors with individual responsibilities, or are we also looking at corporations, businesses, corporate bodies who also exist as individuals within our legal context as a society? Are we looking at their responsibility? Are we looking at the impact of their actions as a whole as well? And that leads us to some of the considerations that we put forward as as a basis for the need for ethical conduct at the beginning of this at the beginning of this course. The common good. What really is the common good? We're always saying, you should act in the best interest of all. You should act in such a way that the sum total of your action as a public servant, as a public administrator should be for the common good. What is the common good? What is the public interest? We're serving the public, but what is the public interest? How does the public interest differ from the common good? And if corporations, businesses exist as legal entities, individuals within our community, then what are corporate goals that serve public interest and serve common good? That is the basis of this next set of discourse. Now, when we talk about common good, everybody usually thinks of welfareism. But welfareism is not the entire context of common good. In fact, the common good belongs to a family of concepts that relate to goodness rather than rightness. And I remember that when we're talking about the common good as an ethical basis for policy earlier on, we had also we emphasized this, that the common good relates to goodness rather than rightness, and for that basis, it may be a weak reason to, it may be a weak argument when you are asking people to take an action that may not be in their individual interest, but may be important for, public interest. Now, what makes the common good different from other concepts in this family is that it is a notion of the good that is understood to be internal to the requirement of a social relationship. So the common good only exists because there is a social relationship, in play. Right. So when we're talking about so just a minute. Okay, I'm trying to get something set up. Okay, so when we're talking about the common good, it is best understood as part of an encompassing model for practical reasoning among the members of a community. It takes for granted that citizens, it takes for granted that there's a political relationship or a civic relationship between that community, and that relationship requires them to create and maintain certain facilities on the ground that it serves everybody. It serves common interests. Now, that relevant facility and interest constitutes what we know of as the common good and serves a shared standpoint for social political deliberation. When citizens face various questions about legislation, public policy, or social responsibility, usually they will resolve these questions by appealing to the concept of relevant facilities and relevant interests. As they will argue about what is that thing that has a special claim on their attention. That's what they will focus on, and how they should expand, contract, or maintain those existing facilities, and what they should design and build in the future. It could range from common infrastructure that everybody uses. It could also relate to common policies, for example, the right to own property. It could also relate to common things that we all share, security within our community. Those are common goods, right? And everybody enjoys them as a people together. It's within all of our interests to be a safe community, to continue to maintain safety, to continue to maintain sanitation, cleanliness, so that nobody comes down with ill health, right? In any community, the common good consists of the facility and interest that members have a special obligation to care about in virtue of the fact that they stand in certain relationship with one another. Now, remember that the basis, like I said here, is that for the common good to be common good, there must be a relationship that we take for granted exists between the people that we are bringing together. Welfareism does not consider any need for a relationship to be established. Okay? In a family, for instance, the family home is part of what we consider as the common good, because everybody requires the members to take care of the home as part of their shared effort to care for one another in safety. Instead of university maintaining academic freedom, every member protects each other's academic freedom in such a way that, because we know that if injury to one person is injury to others as well. So we always try as much as possible to ensure that we maintain academic freedom. Nobody will be bullied by other colleagues to only focus in their own interest. Everybody is allowed to flourish, like Chairman Mao says, let 1,000 flowers blossom. Okay. So varied research interests are tolerated, and everybody is allowed to pursue their interests as they find interesting to them. The common good differs from various notions of the good that play a foundational role in welfare consequentialist accounts of political morality. Unlike the common good, what we find under welfareism, things like the sum of pleasure over pain, agent neutrality, those make no essential reference to the requirements of a social relationship. For example, when we're talking about agent neutrality, it assumes that the priorities for welfare, right, is genuinely consequentialist notion. That means that the government that will take is optimal, judged from a standpoint that does not change whether the person being affected is your family member or not. Okay, so understanding it this way, sometimes you may even take an action under welfareism, right, that will better the lot of the poorest person in your community, but may hurt the person that you have a relationship with. This agent neutrality requires you to perform the action that is optimal from the agent neutral standpoint, right? So your action is predetermined on neutral points, on neutral, factual, or evidence-based points that says, take for example, when we're talking about health policies, right? If you want to get access to a transplant, in order to ensure that the most vulnerable in our communities don't have their organs harvested for profit, or do not get adverse financial incentives to either donate their organs or harvest the organs of other people, right? We have certain policies guiding how people can access transplants, organ transplants. For example, and that list is based on first come, first serve. Also, people who want to donate their organs, right, they will donate their organs in a free-form way, meaning that they're not compensated beyond what we will consider, they're not compensated beyond what we consider to be just to relieve the discomfort they may experience when they're donating their organ. So, for example, beyond just helping them recuperate, from the surgery, and that's just hospital costs. So beyond just that, and maybe transportation subsidy, not even full transportation cost, just a subsidy to maybe transport them to the hospital where they donate their organs. The person receiving the organ and the person donating the organ must not have any prior or future financial relationship that makes the person donating their organ receive any financial benefits from the organ they've donated. Also, the person who is donating that organ, right, their relative or their partner must in no way benefit from that organ. Right? So all of this is organized in such a way that nobody can shunt the line to get an organ earlier than somebody who has been on that line for 2 years. And nobody can adversely benefit from donating that organ, except in the illegal organ trade. And all of that has been done to ensure that we protect the most vulnerable in our community. Now, what happens when the son of the only organ transplant surgeon, or maybe a kidney transplant surgeon, right? Their only son happens to have end-stage renal failure, and they're end-stage because they've also been on dialysis for a long time, but they are candidates for organ transplant, and if they get an organ transplant within the next 48 hours, right, they can survive. But they are not, it's not yet their turn on the organ register, and the surgeon is the one in charge of these facilities, right? In welfareism, the surgeon cannot make the decision to favor their own child. Welfareism says that as an agent of neutrality, the surgeon must provide the next available organ for the next patient on the list at the detriment of his own relationship with the son. These are the principles that underline agent neutrality and welfareism compared to common good. So if people have reason to pay special attention to the worst of member of their own families on this view, it is because a pattern of reasoning along these lines leads to the highest level of welfare for the worst off person in the world, or the highest average welfare for those in the relevant class. So you cannot change the course of your action because of your relationship with somebody on the list. You need to follow through so that the next worst off person is the one that gets the benefits. But if, for example, the child of the surgeon is next on the list, they cannot say, because I have a relationship with my child, I will, scoot over this my child and go to the next person on the list just to show that I'm a more neutral agent. No, that means they would have done harm to the worst of person that requires that surgery at that time. I hope we understand this argument around this point.
Yes, sir.
That the common good, excellent. That the common good and welfareism can indeed coincide, but most often than not, the common good and welfareism have different sets of values, right? Okay, because it's an agent neutral notion, welfare prioritarianism may require parents to harm their own children if circumstances arise and doing so will bring about the best result from the standpoint of the welfare of the worst off person in the world or the average welfare of those in the relevant class. That's the import of the example I gave earlier on. Okay, and that implication is at odds with our ordinary understanding, right, of the agent relative character, where we talk about common good. Also, the common good is also different from public interest, but there are areas where they also intersect, right? In economic theory, public good is that's a public interest or public good. It's a particular that members of the community would not possess if they were each motivated only by their own self-interest. What if someone at the back of the line has a short time to leave and the person in front of the line? So usually there are sets of criteria that are used. It's not just the criteria of the first person on the list. Sorry, give me a minute. Someone is knocking. Just give me 1 minute. Sorry about the disruption.
Just
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
He asked us to excuse him.
Okay.
He's attending to something.
Thank you. I'm back here. So yeah, there are different sets of criteria that are used, including severity
Hello,
of illness. Hello, can you hear me?
Sorry, sir. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please go ahead. I can hear you.
Okay. Supposing we have a case where there's a patient down the waiting list, and the patient, let's say a man, and then the wife decides to donate an organ for him, or a daughter and the son, that's the brother, wants to donate an organ for the person. What do you do in that instant?
Okay, so that is possible, but in public health facilities, right? In public health facilities, usually when an organ is available, it goes to the list. It does not go to an individual. So most of the time, because in the public facility, the services available are considered public goods, right? The service will go to the next available person on the list. But if this person has a donor and there is a private facility that is willing to accept them, having satisfied the demands of neutrality, that is not because they are buying organ of this person, then the process goes ahead. So the person donating an organ in a public facility cannot request that it goes to a particular person. Like I said, in a public facility, the services available are considered as public goods. So therefore, it has to go to the predetermined list based on predetermined criteria. Okay, and all of this is done to ensure that decisions are neutral and influenced by are not influenced by evil actors. I hope we understand that. So that helps us see that welfareism is different, and the main difference is that point of relationship. The relationship exists under the common good, and under welfareism, the relationship does not need to exist. Okay, moving on. Now, between the common good and public interest, like I said, public interest, right? Um, public good, or public interest is a particular type of good that members of the community would not possess if they were each motivated only by their own self-interest. For example, um, a good part of sub-Saharan Africa has the issue of malaria, right? Now, if residents within a community decide that, if most of the residents decide that they will spray their lawn, right, with insecticides and kill the mosquitoes in order to prevent malaria, of course, vector control is one of the ways of one of the public health methods for controlling the incidence of malaria. So if the majority of people within a community control the incidence of malaria will go down in that community. But remember that all of those people within the community that decide to spray their own house would have spent money to do that action. And all of those people that did not spray, that's the minority that did not spray their house, but also enjoy the benefit, even though they have kept their own money in their park. Yes. I hear you. Hello. Hello. Okay, so going on, I said public interest. So that's public interest. If a few people do it, if people do it at cost to them, it benefits everybody. But if only a few people do it, then everybody will suffer because the benefits will not accrue, right? Another example is polio vaccination. If the majority of people in a community do not take polio vaccine, then children within that community will still suffer from polio. But you see, in spite of the fact that, for example, in Nigeria, there is a faith-based, right? But because the number of families that abstain from taking these vaccines because of either social religious beliefs or reason, right? The percentage of those people are small. Right? What it results into is that the majority who access the vaccine serve as herd immunity or serve as a buffer zone, preventing that infection from coming into that community. Hello there all. Okay, so part of the social roles I'm performing this morning, aside from being a lecturer, is also I'm performing roles as well. So my kids keep interjecting, and so apologies for that. So those are the role conflicts that happen in social relations. Now, the question here is, how does this relate to the COVID-19 vaccination, where a lot of people refuse to accept the vaccine? In which community? It differs from community to community. So, for example, we can use examples across, we can compare apples to apples, right? For example, we can compare incidence and deaths and hospitalizations across let's first look at three countries. For example, Israel had one of the highest compliance rates as soon as vaccines were available. And from the time vaccination became available, Israel had the lowest incidence of deaths due to COVID-19 vaccine and hospitalizations for severe hospitalizations due to severe disease symptoms from COVID-19. Also in US, for areas where in US, for areas where the vaccine mandate was accepted, okay. So initially in the US, right, there were consensus objectors. So for the area where you had a lot of consensus objectors, before they now did the intervention with education, to increase uptake, you will find that as uptake of the vaccine was increasing, there seems to be more protection and fewer people going down the COVID-19. But most especially, what really decreased was the severity of the disease, because people were staying infected, but the severity of the disease was lower. In the UK, the same trend was seen, that as vaccination levels increased, similar to China as well, as vaccination level increased, there were fewer severe COVID infections and more people who could recuperate at home, right? Now, the other thing people usually compare is uptake in Africa, for example, compared to what we were seeing in the Americas, in the UK, and other and global north countries. But those are not comparing apples to apples. The reason is in one of the things that we had, for example, is malaria, right? And because of exposure to anti-malarials and exposure to some of the agents that were also used treating, early on in the treatment of COVID-19 as well, right? We had lower response to our symptomology for COVID-19 wasn't as severe as people who had not, had a malaria endemic, who didn't live in malaria endemic areas. It was not even as severe for Nigerians who had COVID-19, who were living in Nigeria, compared to expatriates who came into Nigeria and contracted COVID-19 in Nigeria. A lot of the expatriates had severe symptomatology compared. That's when I mean symptomatology, in what cases of the COVID-19 symptoms compared to Nigerians who contracted COVID-19, and had some symptoms. So, all those differences in across board, cannot help. It didn't allow us to be really compare the data from low uptake in Africa, you know, to high uptake in Americas and in the UK, for example. Another very good one another very good case that you can probably use is if you compare uptake in Italy to the UK, right? Uptake in Italy, Greece, and UK, you would see that in the UK, as uptake was increasing, there were fewer deaths and fewer hospitalizations due to serious COVID-19 infection. But in Italy, as long as vaccine uptake was low, they continued to experience, severe disease. They continue to experience high death rates from COVID-19. They continue to experience social disruption until when they were able to access vaccines as well. So those are some of the comparisons. But as soon as people began to take the vaccines, there was, a longer route for the virus to travel to begin to infect people, and that resulted in fewer cases being reported. Okay. There's a schematic that shows how this happens, but I don't have access to it right now. But all it does to show is that if, for example, one person is okay, so then they used to tell us that you were 8 degrees separated from one person with COVID-19. So, for example, if 10 people, right, that you come in contact with as an infected person have been vaccinated against COVID-19, they will most likely have mild disease, which means that they're not having a lot of the coughing, they're not having a lot of the fluid exudate, which are the main carriers of the pathogen, right? So because they're having fewer cases of this shedding, right, it means they are also not more likely to pass it on to people who are healthy. Okay, so that is how this thing works. That's how the public stuff works. Okay. So it's one person contributing to the protection of their neighbors, or several people contributing to the protection of their neighbor, right? So those are public goods, right? Now, as long as individual self-interest supersedes, no one will be willing to pay so that their neighbor benefits at their own expense, right? So the facilities that make the common good, they also resemble public goods, though, because they are often things that are supposed to be open and available for everyone. Just the example of this public library, for example. Public library is a common good, right? Everybody in the community will benefit from it. But the way it becomes public interest is that, take for example, if myself as a person, right, and I run a bakery, and then after a while, we all contribute, right? And we open at least our taxes are used to open a library. And then in one of the sections in the library is contained that are used to bake within that community in the last 5 years. And so people can just go into the library, copy the recipe, and for their parties, they don't need to order their food shops from it. It is not for at my interest that really exists. It's public good, but I'm less interested in the fact that, or I am made worse off by the fact that I have to solve that I get solved. Right? Similarly, about health insurance, right? Health insurance is access to health is a common have access to services. But have universal access to health services, some people need to pay a premium, right? So some people need to pay for health insurance. For young people who are healthy and otherwise active, it is for them a public interest. So it is not for their benefit at that time that they are paying for health insurance. But as long as they continue to pay, right, the public benefits, and when they also have need of it, they will benefit. But in that time when they are healthy and strong, it is not in their benefit. It's not to their benefit, right? So those are areas where common goods may also intersect, right? Now, why do we even think about this common good? What benefit is it? If everybody is just doing their own thing, won't we have a society that functions very well, right? The consideration here is that a private society whose members care about their lives as private individuals and will only take those actions that benefit them as private individuals, right? Focus on their I'm interested in acquiring a better home for my family, improving the school that my children attend, in elections, my house or my school. But I take no interest in national elections insofar as the results affect citizens. So, for example, this person will be someone who votes in local government elections, the votes in state elections, no votes in national elections, right? They withdraw into private life, care about only the common affairs of the community that touch their private world. But that is not a good model, for life. A community of rational people will not perform the actions necessary to generate public interest or public goods. Since these goods are desirable, the absence of those public goods may be suboptimal from the standpoint of everybody benefits, and the fact that some people may also benefit more than others. So there are good reasons why we should create a public agency, that can use tactics to give coercive threats to draw people into mutually beneficial patterns of cooperation. The common good, however, points to a different kind of defect in a private society. So often to a private society, not just to a society of self-interested people or rational egoists. That defect is non-instrumental. It is that members of the community have an obligation to care about their common affairs. So the fact that they are not concerned about that is a moral defect. That's how we think about it in public, in common good, right? That everybody is guided at their own interest. And they are essentially just their own commercial interest that they are thinking of, without thinking of the common or the public interest. Then in that society, you'll find out that people who are worse off are extremely worse off. So there's no example the gaps between the haves and have-nots, right? And in that way, we can say that private interest, right, has become so peculiar of the interest. That people may occupy in a liberal democracy, right? Most of the positions like legislators, civil servants, judges, police officers, healthcare workers, teachers, and so on. Now, in a capacity, when they participate in the political process, discussions in public sphere, many of you that citizens act in public capacity, right? When act well in Ranking positions in colleges, for example, vice chancellors, bossard, first officer in public institutions, chairman of non-profit organizations. For example, in Nigeria, even though they are not funded by public funds, for example, the Gavi, which is the for vaccines, vaccines, people like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that are some of the biggest spenders in health in Nigeria. People like the DFID, funded by the United Kingdom. People like the USAID, United States Agency for National Development in Nigeria. You know, the NFPA, the Port Council, and all of those organizations, they're private organizations, but they serve a public interest because their actions have huge consequences on the benefit, huge consequences on benefit to society. I hope the audio is better now. I'm sorry, the internet has been really poor. But like I said, we'll get the recording to everyone. The recording usually has all these things. Audio is passed from directly from my computer. Let's say I pause it. Okay, so it's important that when we're thinking about actions in public interest, that the actions of those actors in private but public effect, places also are important. Now, when citizens occupy public roles, political morality requires them to think and act differently than they would if they were acting as private individuals. If you are a judge, for example, in a criminal trial, okay, I was talking about this earlier on, right? And you stand to benefit personally if the defendant is found guilty. Yes, I'll call in immediately after. Once it's able, usually it takes about 20 minutes after the session ends, and we'll send it. Political morality does not allow you to decide cases as if you were a private individual to advance your own private objectives. You are required to make that decision on the evidence presented at trial and the standards set out in the law, right? So you cannot change anything or you must not change anything based on your own personal prejudices. You must decide those cases based on established norms. So political morality is to think and act from the standpoint of a shared concern for common interests. Public also be required to make personal sacrifice. Yes, this was the example I mentioned. Scandal. Nixon ordered the Attorney General, Richardson at that time, to fire the Watergate special prosecutor in order to stop investigation into Nixon. That's resigned. And of course, the was unabated until he had to step down because of the scandal that ensued. So sometimes in benefit of the public interest, you make personal sacrifices, as an individual. Now consider this possibility that we are living in a liberal democracy. Now this is also this to how corporations may also participate as individuals, within the public interest. Imagine we're living in a liberal democracy with a full array of social roles in which people act in public capacity. We imagine that society is a private one. Citizens care only about their own private affairs. In order to ensure that various public roles are filled, institutions create private incentives for people to take up this responsibility. For example, we begin to pay judges very huge amounts of money, right? We pay policemen maybe 10 times what we currently pay them. And do all of those things that people compensated in the way that, the motivation is high and the interest is their own personal interest, right? The question is there anything missing in our society at this point? Does our society suffer from a moral defect of some kind? Because everybody is being compensated. Anybody who will do anything is giving value in order to motivate them to do what they need to do. So the questions are, do we think there is anything missing? The answer is yes. There is something morally significant that is missing from such a society. And what is missing is the genuine concern for common good. For those private actors to take private decisions that benefit them over the common good, they will opt for this bribe or opt to do for their friends, in a way. And this is one of the reasons why motivation are complex. Salaries are also a complex discussion. The other the salary of political office holder are less complex to amend than the public officers. The salaries for public office holders, elected office holders, are determined by the fiscal the FAAC determines the remunerations and adjusts it as such. In fact, a very example, recently when the announcement was made for the removal of school subsidy, and the discussion from the political leadership for general and to sacrifice for public interest, right? And the very next FSC released went on the media to announce that they will be reviewing the remuneration for political office holders when the government is asking for the common good. Meanwhile, political office holders were already treating themselves to save from the subsidy removal. Political morality and the concept of common good, and it's not at home or school. Because children as moral agents, as children, when we look at right, initially free agents, but then they become moral agents as they observe and as they provided instances of moral weighting, that's evaluation of decisions that lead to moral consequences in the home, right? Making decisions begin to also invite understanding of relational morality. Of course, when they also begin to the interactions of adults within their community, to begin to learn about morality. We learn it in school, and of course, we also terms in which we learn it is when we perceive it, in public forum. So the large teacher is really the public forum. That's where we pick up about. And in societies where there are no developers, people interested in consistently educating the public, right? Which is one of the roles that journalists play in the community. That's why they are called the fourth realms of the estate, right? Fourth arm of government, right? So in communities where journalists have not taken up that responsibility, propaganda and other forms of social miseducation is a result of things, right? So, like I said, what is a genuine concern, and this lack of concern is itself a moral defect and can lead to different kinds of interpretations, right? Now, what are the central features of the common good? We're going to look at 4 central features of the common good. One is a shared standpoint for practical reasoning. This is the common good, not the public interest. Now we're talking about the common good. Now, a concept of the common good is not just criterion for correct action, so that citizens should satisfy the correct action, regardless of their objective reasons for doing so. Reasons why people take the action, which is the reasoned concern for common good, right, is the base point for actions that are considered common good. That we have a relationship, we are concerned for the well-being of each other, therefore we take actions that result into common good. The point of that is that the pattern of practical reasoning, thinking and acting, right, should be appropriate to decide that what is of mutual concern around all of us within our society is dealt with in a way that nobody is deprived of those common goods. For example, we talked about rights to property. There's nobody in our community that should not have the right to own property, right, regardless of their social status. If they decide and they can pay for the property, then they should have access to the property. In order to satisfy this, the activities of the members of the community must be organized at some level by thought processes that embody the relevant pattern. First feature that is describing a pattern of practical that is meant to be realized in members of the political community. So, put together are shared, those are shared aspirations across the entire society that are considered as common good. Said to own property, the right to own property, security, if people are living under the same roof, the decision to maintain their household, to maintain their property. The second is a set of common facilities. Most of the conceptions are around this. Most of the conceptions, the common good identifies a set of facilities that citizens have a special obligation to maintain in virtue of the fact that this facility serves the common interest. Okay, and those facilities may not just be artifacts, they may not be physical buildings, they may be policies. It could also include our environment, for example, roads that we use, the rainforest, preserving the rainforest, preserving natural resources like our freshwater sources, They could also be built artifacts like schools, hospitals, but the most important facilities, right, are social institutions and practices. Social institutions and practices, they are very important because they help, bring together our understanding and our precepts around what we understand for the common good. I've given that example before, that one of the social institutions we have is that everybody has a right to own property, right? And that social institution serves the common interest. Everybody should be able to assert private control over their physical environment. And so many concepts include this institution as part of the common good. The next we talk about is privileged class of common interest, right? The concept of common good define privileged class of abstract interest, right? Citizens are understood to have a relationship and a relational obligation to create and maintain certain facilities because these serve relevant interests. The interests in the privileged class are common in the sense that every citizen is understood to have this interest to a similar degree, right? But these interests are also abstract in the sense that they may be served by a variety of material, cultural, and institutional facilities, right? A wide variety of interests figure prominently in the literature. One, interest in taking part in the most choice-worthy way of life, interest in security and property, interest in living a responsible and industrious, private life, interest in fully access scheme of equal basic liberties for everybody within the community. All of these are considered privileged class of common interest. And then lastly, a solidaristic concern. You can look at this like maybe we use friendship to describe this solidarity, right? Because most concepts of the common good define that there is a practical reasoning that fits a model of solidarity. These social relationships require a form of solidarity that you consider somebody's well-being when considering your own. For example, if your friend is in town and calls you and says, "Oh, in town," one of the first things you think about is, where's my friend going to sleep? Okay, my friend may share my room with me, or maybe if you're a more private person, okay, maybe when my friend comes, I'll put an airbed in the parlor and then inflate it and then they sleep there. But you're already putting that person's consideration and it's yours as well, right? So it involves you giving a certain subset of your interest, of the interest of another person, in your reasoning, so that so you're combining your interest and their interest and saying, okay, I can give away some of my privacy, allow this person to invade my privacy for this limited time that they'll be in town, right? You do this because your friendship requires that you reason about events that affect your friend's basic interests. If these events were affecting your own basic interests in a similar way, right? This concept requires that citizens maintain certain facilities because these serve common interests. So when citizens reason, as the concept requires, they effectively give the interest of their fellow citizens a status in their reasoning that ensures that, that is analogous to the status that give their own interest in their reasoning. So it matches them and says, even though, I intend to do this, but I must not let my own liberties, cost my neighbor their own liberties. So to the extent that I enjoy my liberties, I must consider the liberties of my neighbor and ensure that there is a nexus or there's a meeting point where our rights, our is accommodate each other. Everybody in our community has the same interest that all of us can, bring our full force to ensure that each member, is fully protected. So an attack on one is an attack on all. Right? We stand behind each person's physical security and property rights to ensure that they are protected. Now, okay, in last 5, I thought it was 4 that I actually exposed here. So the last one, closely related features and most concepts of the aggregates aggregative view of individual interest. The aggregative view treats satisfaction of individual interest as commensurable values, and it extends to maximize these values because it focuses on the aggregate. The aggregative view may require citizens to impose a debilitating condition on some of their fellow citizens when this will generate sufficient gain for others. Now, this is at variance with the initial view that we looked at, which was solidarity, where you look at you look at the need of your friend or the need of your neighbor, in making accommodation for your own needs. Starting with an appropriate view of your own interest, right? Solidarity will require each citizen to give certain interest of citizen a status in your reasoning. So you always consider that, okay, in my expression of my own right property, I must make sure that I do not impinge on the rights of property, rights of expression of my neighbor, right? For example, solidarity will not subject some of their fellow citizens to slavery, even if this might produce substantial benefits for others or themselves, because enslavement would involve a failure on the part of each citizen to give the interest of each of our enslaved comrades the right status in her reasoning. Okay, so we do not take the rights. We do not take the rights of some of our citizens in order to do benefits to some other of our citizens, right? Solidarity negates that part. We must consistently think about that the rights of all citizens are equally patent and must be equally respected. There are 2 common interests that we should look at: joint activity and private individuality. But because of time, I will not go into it right now. Let's just quickly look at markets, competition, and the invisible hand as we round up this section. I'll give the remaining part to you in the notes, about 2 parts to read up, and then now for markets, competition, and the invisible hand, we're looking at how corporate goals can be directed to benefit the common good and public interest where they accept, right? Citizens have this relational obligation to care about certain common interests and social coordination. Through markets can draw citizens into a pattern of production activity and consumption activity that answers this interest, right? Now, even though this is so, we have examples where capitalistic the way capitalistic commerce organized, it leads to some benefits, right? We have some philosophers that are saying that if we aim only to have a capitalistic society, that we allow businesses to decide what they want to do, how they want to do it, without the reins of taxes, policies, regulation, oversight, and all, that these companies will behave as free moral agents and will cater to the common good and public interest. Meanwhile, another part of the argument says that if we allow these people to run rogue, they are going to extract all the benefits for their stakeholders and their shareholders, and they will not return any value to the common citizen, right? That is the start point of this argument. Right. Now, there's an example here. Take for example that a country, let's say Nigeria, decides that education will henceforth not be a public good, or rather, education will now be a commercial interest, or we'll use business to educate we'll turn our education into a commercial interest, and government will not be directly funding education anymore as a public good, right? What this means is that schools will be for profit, they'll operate like companies, they'll sell education services to the public, right? Parents in turn will act as consumers, buying the best education for their children at the lowest cost, right? And each citizen in this arrangement will reason from one standpoint of their own private concerns, as consumers, as in each of their different angles. No one will act out of concern for the education system in particular, right? Since that common interest is not served by any particular private interest. In fact, pushing for a business-based or market-based sorry, just a minute, let me copy this form link. I have sent the form link now, you can have it. Okay, so where was I? Okay, so I'm saying that making the markets to determine how the citizens are educated would mean that there's no one that is, aggregating or directing our thoughts and our actions for the common good. Everybody is acting in their personal interest. And even though this leads to everybody increasing their skill, their effectiveness, and and then coming back to use those same benefits that they get from their skills and effectiveness to buy out services in the community, and in that way improve the outcomes within the community. Even though everybody is doing that, right? We're still saying that this does not mean that the common good will still be fully attended to. In fact, Adam Smith and Hill, right, proposed that this view of the market, even when the market is a free agent, right, we'll get to a point where all of these actions being taken by individual actors will act in the public good. Now, this official concept shapes the laws and guides the government in managing the economy. So even if citizens do not reason from the standpoint of common good as market actors, their lives as a whole will be organized by that form of reasoning that is focused on maintaining shared facilities for the sake of common interests. Right. Now, sorry, I skipped something there. Hegel and Adam Smith say that when the market, is interacting, that individual actors will also become communities, and they will discuss their common interest in the public sphere, right? And this results into official concepts shaping the laws and guiding the common good as market actors. Now, the basis for what they are saying is that everybody acts independently, but along the line, there are goods that we still need to account for, and that will happen, right? Without thinking that there will still be that the majority may end up as actors that do not intend to participate in that common good and would rather extract all the value for themselves. Now, the person that brings up that counter argument is Marx, where he initially agrees that yes, political communities must organize their activities in light of the concept of common good, but it does not believe that these individual actors acting in their own interest will live up to that idea of, beginning to talk together and now decide, okay, this is the common good, let's do it. It says that the political community must be radically democratic in the sense that ordinary citizens participate directly in the collective effort to organize social life by appealing to that concept of the common good. That if nobody is continually pushing it forward, everybody's goat is nobody's goat. The goat will starve and die. The community's goat is nobody's goat. I think that's the right word. Nobody's goat. And that community goat will starve and die. That's what Marx said. Everybody is doing fine. But we must have that social institution aggregate what is known as social common good and organizes us together to work in that life. And that people cannot be trusted to do that by themselves. In one of his seminal papers, it says that the life process of society, which is based on the process of material production, commerce, does not strip off its mystical veil, but it's treated as production by freely associated men and is consciously regulated by them in accordance with a settled plan. So if people don't organize themselves and talk about the common good, it says no free actors will come together and begin to talk about it. That we cannot leave society to organize itself by itself. We must organize society by political actions. In a properly ordered political community, members will transcend the authoritarian mysticism of price coordination and organize their production and consumption activities through an open and transparent process of reasoning that makes explicit to everyone how the activities serve the common interest. When it comes to corporate executives, the argument is that for a certain kind of socially conscious orientation, corporate leaders must reason from the standpoint of the common good, at least limiting their strategic pursuit So corporations must take into cognizance common good when they are also planning their exploration of minerals, disruption of the environment, building, manufacturing, waste discharge into public streams. They must take into cognizance public good. They must also look into ethical ways of manufacturing that reduces their carbon footprint. They must look into innovations that reduce the impact on the environment of their manufacturing activity or their sales activity, right? All of these are important, to reason and think about. And as public actors as well, we must be aware of these, that these are some considerations that are important, especially as regulators, that we must think about advancing to our what are they called, to firms that we regulate. A great deal of work still remains to be done when it comes to these other aspects of market life that may require citizens to reason from a more socially conscious perspective, particularly when we're thinking about labor rights, political liberties, and climate change. Very, very important. Also talking about global poverty, and global poverty can be multidimensional. We can talk about energy poverty. We can talk about some other aspects of poverty as well. So it's important that we reason carefully through all these when as regulators. Issues has to do with competition. Market coordination typically works through a process in which citizens compete with one another for important goods, right? In the US, for example, we have, the bandwidth is low. So if we share video and other things, we may get the network will begin to falter again. Now, Another set, okay, I felt that has to do with competition, right? Competition for important goods. In the US, for example, right, labor market participants compete for jobs that substantially determine who gets access to different levels of income, and by extension, healthcare as well, police protection, contribution in social justice, and political influence. As citizens square off against each other, each one tries to secure the important goods for himself or herself, knowing that their activities, if successful, right, effectively drives some other citizens, deprives some other citizens of the same goods because they are finite. In this way, labor market competition requires citizens to act with extreme forms of disregard for their actions and how it affects other players in, and their basic interests. So around, how do we now work as conscientious individuals? How do we ensure that market competition is still consistent with relational obligations, to ensure that we care about common interests? And so there's a way Cohen has articulated the problem in terms of socialist principles of community that rules out social arrangements that require people to view one another simply as obstacles that must be overcome. You view them as cooperators in the community towards social progress, right? Another more moderate view, which I think is that there's sort of competition, but explores the fact that you do not have to act in an evil way, right? Is a more moderate view, argues that there is a difference between friendly competition and a life or death struggle. Political relationship allows for a certain degree of competition among citizens, but limits how severely institutions can treat citizens when it comes to goods that are part of the common good. For example, healthcare, education, and social basis of self-respect. In conclusion, we've looked at the common good, but also we should realize that in our chase of the common good, the baseline is still social justice. This is what we are going for. Consider the case of friendship we talked about earlier on. It's a social relationship that requires those who stand in a relationship to think and act in ways that embody a particular form of mutual concern. The relevant form of concern incorporates basic requirements of morality, right or wrong. As friends must not lie to each other, must not assault each other, or take unfair advantage of each other. But even strangers are required to conform to these basic moral standards. What will distinguish the friendship is that there's a form of mutual concern that goes beyond basic morality and requires that friends must maintain certain patterns of conduct on the grounds that these patterns serve their common interest, right? Members of the political community stand in a social relationship, and this relationship also requires them to think and act in ways that embody a certain form of mutual concern, the common good. The common good defines this form of concern. And when the common good incorporates those basic requirements of social justice, as citizens must provide one another with basic rights and freedoms and must not exploit each other. But the common good goes beyond those basic requirements of justice because it requires citizens to maintain certain patterns of conduct on the ground that these patterns serve everybody in their common interests. With that, we come to the end of our discussions around the common good. We have looked at the common good. We have looked at how it is different from welfarism or welfare consequentialism. We've looked at how the common is different from public interest or public goods. We've looked at how the common good intersects with political philosophies, why we need to be conscious of the common good. as uh, as members of society and as as reasoned thinkers. We've also looked at the central features of the common good, how practical, how it's how the common good has a shared standpoint for practical reasoning, a set of common facilities, including rights to own property, rights to safety, rights to shelter, uh, you know, uh, also, we looked at the class of common interests, under the common good. We looked at the solidaristic concern as well, how, shared interests or you as a moral agent can look at the interests of your neighbor or of your friends and take it into consideration when you make your decision. And we also looked at the non-aggregative concern and said that this does not the non-aggregative concern does not align with the principles of the common good, and that a solidaristic concern is the right way to go. We've looked at joint activity. Oh, okay, so I said that we will the notes that I will send to you will discuss joint activity and private individuality of common interest. And of course, we looked at market competition and the invisible hand, just to show that private people acting in their own private interest cannot be, thought of to end up doing social good. That there must be a coherent political effort to pull everybody together, under a regulatory force. And then we concluded by saying that the common good goes beyond social justice and brings everybody into a relational setting. With that, we have come to the end of our discussion of the common good, the public interest, and public, what's that third point we discussed? Corporate goals. That's businesses, corporate goals. Any questions for me? I am sorry I have taken I've taken almost, no, not almost two. I've taken 1 whole hour after the predetermined time. I apologize for that. Any questions for me as we quickly round up? I promise you get the recording, so I'll send it once everybody's mail is put in our database latest by this evening. Please ask anyone that is on the group to please respond, send in their email so that everybody gets it at the same time. That's the link to the form again. Please help me share in our WhatsApp groups.
Sir,
Yes, Mr.
thank you.
Fashira, please go ahead.
Thank you for the lecture, sir. I
Thanks
want
for
to ask,
participating.
sir, do you, is there going to be another lecture with you? On this course after today?
Yes, like I said, there were 4 topics I have just covered.
Okay. All right, sir. And also, sir, is it possible towards the exam, is it possible we have something like tutorial question to prepare us towards the exam? Hello, sir. Hello.
Sorry, the network fluctuated again. So like I said, we can choose any day of your choosing except Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. Both days I will be super busy. So if you want to move from Thursday, we can choose any other time.
Hello, sir.
Hello? Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Please, I want to ask, is it possible for us to get tutorial questions that can prepare us towards the exam?
Yes, when are your exams coming up?
They've not told us exactly when it's coming up, but the course coordinator
Okay.
said very soon that it's not going to take so much time from now.
All right, no problem. I will get some practice questions for you as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks to everyone for being a part of this session today. I wish you a wonderful weekend and have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.